welcome to another edition of Ask Ron. I'm Ron, if you don't know. Ron Harris. So, first question today comes from Jeff Riley. I believe this came to me via Instagram or Facebook, one of those. It wasn't through the MD threads or anything like that. Jeff Riley asks, at what age did you make the switch to TRT, which stands for Testosterone Replacement Therapy? I know you mentioned you started training at age 14, and would imagine you began using AAS, anabolic androgenic steroids, during your 20s. I'm asking because every time I come off and get blood work done, my test is lower and lower. We just started a new show with Dr. Thomas O'Connor, the anabolic doc. He could offer you great advice about that, explain why that happens, but it's a very real phenomenon that happens to all long-time steroid users. If you use enough steroids for long enough, your body just is not going to produce enough testosterone on its own ever again. So, you know, you're gonna hit that point eventually if you keep using steroids on and off. And the more of them you use, the higher the doses and the longer you stay on with less time off in between for your body's own ability to recover. You know, you probably hit that point sooner rather than later. Okay, so yes, I started training at age 14. It was ninth grade, high school. I turned 14 in the beginning of ninth grade, and that's when I've been consistently training since then. So I was 14. I trained naturally up until I was 27 years old, so it's 13 years drug-free, completely drug-free. There were no pro-hormones back then, nothing. So, you know, I was actually totally drug-free. So when I was 27, I used them for a year. That year was 1997. So yeah, I turned 28 at the end of fall of 97. So I used them pretty consistently that year. I was doing like 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off the whole year. So that was 97. 98, I didn't use them. You know, I had planned on using them, just trying and see what happened to me. I got pretty good results, but you know, I still didn't. I like a lot of natural bodybuilders, I had this delusion that I would take steroids and blow up and I'd look like a pro. And I certainly made really good gains, very significant gains, put on a lot of size in a short amount of time, and certainly surpassed where I had been naturally. But I didn't look like a pro. So that was enough for me to be able to walk away from them at that point, and I didn't resume using them again until I was going to turn 30 in September of 1999. So I had scheduled a photo shoot right around that time with Michael Nevue of Iron Man Magazine, and also I did a shoot in Gold's Gym with Jerry Fredericks for Iron Man Magazine. He used to have a page that was just photos, like little photos, a montage of working a body part. I did that, and I also was going to be the star of a couple. Valio was known for weight belts, but they also made briefly weightlifting gloves. Actually, maybe they still do. I don't know. So my friend Tim Watson of Watson Film Corps, who I knew from the American Muscle Show, and, you know, they always say it's who you know, right? And it was in this case, definitely. He needed a bodybuilder for the commercial for the gloves, and he said, you know, can you be in shape at this day? And I said, sure. So now he had planned to shoot at that time. I scheduled a shoot with Mike Nevue. So it just seemed like this is a great time. I'm turning 30. Let me see if I can get in really good shape. And it's the only time in my life I've ever dieted down into contest condition without actually competing, without the goal of a contest. Haven't done it since. I did it that one time. And I decided I was going to go back on a small amount of steroids for that occasion, for the photo shoots and that video shoot, the commercial shoot. It was really peanuts of a cycle. I mean, if I tell you what it is, it was like there was this injectable D-ball that we were getting in California called Reforvit B. It was vitamin B plus Dianabol. I did like a tiny amount of that and a small amount of something else. Maybe it was Deca or something. But it was, I think I was on 500, 600 milligrams a week total for 6 weeks. Because I just wanted enough to hold my mass and diet down. And it's exactly what I did. You know, in those days I was still responding pretty well to smaller amounts, very moderate doses. And that's why I tell people, you know, if you're going to do steroids, don't start out with heavy amounts, because then where do you go from there? You're going to have to keep going up and up. But if you start out smaller amounts and you get good results, keep using that amount until, but your body gets accustomed to that, and then you're going to have to bump it up and use more. But why start out with big amounts? So that's what I did. I started out small. So I did them for that photo shoot and got into really good shape. And that was 99. And I'd say from that point on, I was consistent with them. So the fall of 99, then 2000, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. Toward the end of 05, I decided, I've had enough of this, I like the way I look on them and feel on them, and I'm stronger and all this, but let me just go off and see what happens, see if I can get my own, let's make some gains on my own naturally, like I did for all those years. So 2006 Arnold Classic, I used them up until that show. I wasn't competing in the Arnold Classic. I was working a booth for Gaspari at that show, and like a lot of knuckleheads that go to these expos and shows, you want to be big for the event, to walk around. I've even made jokes and made fun of these people, even though I do it myself. But so 2006 Arnold Classic, and I said after that I'm going to give my body a chance to see if it can bounce back, and because I was still, at that point I was still 36 in the spring of 2006. So I figured I still probably had a few good years of my own body's production left before I had to think about starting to use them just as a maintenance thing. So the rest of 06, I stayed clean. 07, I stayed clean, and I won the only overall I've ever won, and it was a drug-tested show, the NPC Colonial Cup, I think it was called. Anyway, it wasn't a very big show, but I did win light heavyweight and overall at 194 pounds. So, summer of 2008, I decided now I'm going to get myself tested, my blood work done, and see where I'm at, because I was feeling like I was, good size, strength and all that. And I figured maybe I want to confirm that my own body's testosterone production had returned back to normal levels. So I got the blood work done. It was not back to normal. So I was going to a place, I don't even know who referred me. It was called Men's Health Boston. It's still around. And I was lucky enough to work one-on-one, be the patient of Dr. Abraham Morgenthaler, Morganthaler. You should Google this guy, because just like the anabolic doc, he's a champion of TRT. He's written books about it. He was able to do some research that dispelled the myth that TRT leads to prostate cancer at greater levels. It doesn't. He's a very brilliant man. He teaches at Harvard Medical School. So I was his patient, and he tested me that time, and then we did it again to confirm it another month or so, or 2 months later, because they don't just take one blood work as their gauge, their marker for where you're at. They want to see a couple different results over a period of time to confirm that you're legitimately in need of testosterone replacement therapy. So that was 8. I believe I was 39, or just turning 39, when I started TRT. The first method used those were testosterone pellets. He wanted to do those. He was having good success with those with his patients, because unlike injections, oil injections that you have to do every week or every 2 weeks, or the gel that you have to do every day, these are pellets that are implanted and you're glued pretty deep in with like a big pellet gun. It injects them in there. So we put those in, and I don't think he really warned me, or maybe I was still doing martial arts, kickboxing, 3 times a week at that point. I was still training legs and everything, of course. So I think I was supposed to be inactive for a week or two to let the pellets really settle, and I didn't. So, one day I'm feeling the area, this is maybe a week later, and I feel a little hard something. It feels like a thicker grain of rice, which is basically what these pellets are. They're very small. It had worked itself back up to the surface of the skin, and it was coming out. So I pulled it out, put it in a little baggie. I was concerned. Next day, another one came up. So now I'm really concerned. So I went back to the doctor and had the pellets in the baggie, and he said, it doesn't work for everybody. That's why we have different methods. So at that point, he prescribed me androgel, which you had to rub on once a day. You get it was like 4 squirts delivered. You pump out. It's a little pump thing, and you pump out however much you need, and rub that on your skin, let it dry. So I did that for a long time. Was that the full question? I want to make sure I'm answering everything. Yeah, so, I gave myself over 2 years off steroids for my own testosterone production to resume to normal levels, and it did not. So it was never going to. At that point, the damage had been done, and for a lot of you guys out there now who are using, you're going to be in the same situation, unfortunately. But luckily we do have understanding doctors that will help you out. And if your regular doctor can't do this for you, doesn't want to do it, he might refer you to an endocrinologist. I need to say something about these. A lot of guys say they're on TRT, okay, and they're not. TRT is when a doctor prescribes you either, those pellets that are implanted, or you get a certain amount of testosterone from a pharmacy to inject yourself, or you go to the office to be injected in some cases if you don't want to do it yourself, or you get the Androgel, which I was getting through, the pharmacy over at Costco. So they will only prescribe the amount that you need to bring you into normal levels, and they confirm that by having you take that amount and you come in and get more blood work done, and they check that. Then you come back a few weeks later and do more blood work, and they want to see where your levels are at, your free and total testosterone levels. So they want you to be on just the right amount, not too little and not too much. So a lot of guys say that they're on TRT, but they're not doing that. What they're doing is going through these anti-aging clinics. A lot of them are based out of Florida. I know there's some in Arizona, places like Palm Springs, California. These clinics, you never actually see a doctor. You do like a survey online. You might have to go to a local, like a Quest Diagnostics, and give them blood work. But essentially, they're going to prescribe you anything you want. You get I know people I've seen the menus and stuff. They have a whole menu of all kinds of different types of tests, DECA, Anavar, all kinds of stuff, growth hormone, and you can get all this. Basically, it's a la carte. You can just pick and choose whatever you want. So they're basically they're a dealer. Basically, they're an online dealer, except they're not hiding behind some shady name or something like that. They're a legitimate business. I don't know. Some of these places have been shut down, and I don't know the legalities and how long they're going to stay in business like that. But when you say you're on TRT, what that means is the legitimate amount prescribed by a doctor just to keep your normal range. So these guys that go to the clinics, they can be on 2 grams of gear a week. No legitimate doctor would prescribe you those amounts of steroids. That's what a bodybuilder would want, to get as huge as possible, or a powerlifter to be as strong as possible. But for a regular person, a regular man who's either just older, in his 40s or 50s, and his levels have naturally declined, or maybe he's in his 20s even, or 30s, but he's destroyed his own body's ability to produce testosterone, he's only going to be prescribed a dose that brings him into normal levels, between 300 and 800, or everyone has a different idea of the range, different doctors, but generally speaking, normal levels are considered to be between 300 and 800, where when we talk about Dallas, was his test level was like 55,000, and a lot of guys, if you're on a good amount, if you're on like a gram a test a week, and then Tren and DECA and all this stuff, your levels are going to be your testosterone levels are going to be in the thousands. So that's not TRT when you're doing that. That's just you're on drugs. You're on a cycle of drugs, for better or worse. I'm not. Who am I to judge? I'm not. I'm no one to judge, so I'm not going to. Another question I get very often is, how do the pros afford all the drugs they use? This is a good question. It's a legitimate question, because steroids are a little pricey, but they're not that expensive. What's expensive is growth hormone and this new IGF-1 crap. It's ridiculously expensive. I mean, when you hear about people, in the old days, people were saying things like, the pros spend 30, 50 grand or 70 grand a year on drugs, and that was all bullshit. But now it's very, very possible that a lot of people are spending that amount of money on drugs, because, there's generic growth hormone, but then, you can't really trust it. I know people are going to argue with me, and I don't want to argue because I don't know that much about it, so I'd be a pretty bad debater on that subject. But generally speaking, like if you're a pro, you're not going to use that generic crap. You're going to get pharmaceutical grade stuff. You're going to get actual pharmaceutical growth, which is very, very expensive. It's twice as expensive or more than the generic stuff. And this IGF-1 stuff, I mean, figures I hear guys spending $500-$600 a week. So yeah, how would you afford all that? Well, one thing is a good amount of pros, and I'm not going to give percentages or numbers because I don't know. A lot of pros, they don't pay for their own drugs. They are basically sponsored by some of the labs. So if you have, let's say, Mega Labs, some underground drug lab, they're going to give you all your drugs for free, for your personal use. And in exchange, what you do is when people say, hey, where do I get some good stuff? You're going to say Mega Labs, and here's their email, or here's their website, or here's who to contact, I don't know. And because they know, these labs know that anyone that knows the pros is going to look at them and they're going to think, well, this guy's definitely on some really good stuff. Whatever he's using, it's got to be freaking great. And generally speaking, that's true. Most pros don't use the garbage, the utter shit that is out there that most of you guys have access to. So, so they'll do that. They'll just refer people, and they're getting it for free. In other cases, I know some guys will sell stuff. They'll sell basically just enough to cover their own costs and no more. Most of them aren't looking to be full-time drug dealers and drive Lamborghinis or anything like that. They just want to make enough to support to buy what they need. So any profits they're making, they're turning right over into what they need for themselves. And other cases, I'm sure in other cases, some of these pros have people for whatever reasons buy their stuff for them. Sugar daddy, sugar mama, sponsors, and then in other cases, the pros they have to work really hard at something like training or coaching or some totally unrelated job, make enough money to pay for all this stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of ways, but how do people pay for anything really? It's priorities. It's what you want to spend your money on, right? You could see a guy who spends, there are people out there that spend $50,000 to $100,000 a year on golf, on country club memberships, golf lessons, different golf clubs, all kinds of things. So any hobby can be very expensive. Fishing, people go buy these crazy boats and rods and reels, and any hobby can add up. All right, I'm getting off track. Last question: why do the pros lie about how much they take? First of all, most pros aren't going to answer the question, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't have to. What business is it of yours? What drugs they use and in what amounts? Why do you need to know? It's got nothing to do with you. They have different genetics than you. They could take X amount and you could take X amount, same exact amounts, everything, and they're still going to look so much better than you. What does it matter? Why do you care what they use? I kind of try to compare it to, it's a personal matter, just like your sex life. Is your sex life anybody else's business? If you do this for, if you're a swinger, if you're bisexual, or you use toys or prostitutes or whatever your thing is, that's none of my business. It's none of anyone's business. What I do, what you do, that's your private world there. And steroids in the United States without a prescription, and a prescription is only going to give you that small amount of testosterone, as we said, it's illegal. So you shouldn't be asking these guys. You can ask, but they're not obligated to answer you. They have no obligation to answer questions about what they use and what amounts. And do they lie? I mean, how would you know they're lying? You're just assuming they're lying. I'm sure people do lie about it, but you know what? How would you know? I don't know what anybody takes. They can tell me, and I don't know if they're being truthful or not. And a lot of times I'm sure when guys say what they use, and if it's not as much as you think they're using, you're just going to assume they're lying anyway. So if some guy, a pro, says I'm on a gram of test and a gram of deca, and I do 75 megs of D-ball a day, and I do 10 units of growth a day, he can lay it all out for you. But if you, in your head, think that's not enough to be as big as he is, I'm sure he's on at least 3 or 4 grams of test, this and that, he's doing 20, you have it in your head what you think he's using. Maybe you're right and maybe you're wrong, you don't know, but you're just assuming that they're lying. In many cases, if a guy does come out and say what he's using, which I don't know why anybody would do that, to feel the need for that full disclosure, because it's none of anyone's business. like I said, you're just going to assume they're lying if it's not up to snuff in your head of what you think they're using. And you know, I know that there are larger amounts being used these days than in years past. There's no doubt about that. But I always go back to this: is these people are genetic mutants. They're freaks. You're not going to look like them anyway. So what does it matter? And why do you need to know? It still just boggles my mind. It's just a weird thing. It's got nothing to do with you or your life. It's not going to affect your gains. You know, you're free. You know, to go out and buy whatever you want, use whatever you want. You know, if you think your favorite pro is on 10 grams of gear a week, and that's why he looks the way he looks, you know, no one's stopping you from going out and buying and using 10 grams of gear a week. And if you have the money, all the growth hormone, the insulin, the IGF, go ahead and do it and see if you look like that guy. You know, 99.9% of the time you're not going to, because you didn't have his parents. You had your parents. You know, and they didn't have these awesome, long, full muscle bellies, and they're not myostatin resistant. And, you know, these pros, they're not regular people. Most of them, you know, they start training, they look damn good, then they get on drugs, and boom, these people look like another species. They're not like us. Do you understand that? They're not like us. So this has been a kind of a short one, but I thought it would be good to get that info out there. So thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys' questions, and we'll talk to you next time on Ask Ron.